sermon title, Politics, Sausage and Church. It should actually be, I think, Laws, Sausage and Church. But how we experience politics these days, I think, is probably relevant to say not just laws, but politics in general. It's common wisdom, that idiom. And the church doesn't find itself, I think, in good company if we equate it with the making of sausage, what the ingredients are in the process, and then also politics, how it is practiced, and especially when a law eventually ends up being voted through. It's often messy. You don't know what went into it, and sometimes it doesn't leave you with a good taste in your mouth either. I do think if you come from a, let's say, a journalistic background where we were not debating what truth is, you would probably say, no, I don't agree with you that we should not know the process and what's in a bill, how it came to be and so forth. And also with sausage, if you are a dietitian or somebody that's into food, you would like to know what went in there, how was this made? Like we experienced at the fair booth. I mean, we constantly remind that you shouldn't eat in there and all the regulations. You should obey the proper hygienic code, which is fine. A while ago, I had a conversation with a young man that now and then with his wife and their children would show up at a service here. And 3, 4, 5 times, and then they disappeared. And then I ran into them at a party, a Christmas party. And out of genuine curiosity, not to pursue him, and try and cast a net and draw him in, I asked him if, after the normal pleasantries, how he is and so forth, what made them disappear? Why don't I see them anymore? And did I say something wrong? Did somebody perhaps insult them, or did they run into John or something? And he said, no, on the contrary, they liked the church very much. They enjoyed the people. They weren't offended by anything. They would like to be here and become part of the life of the church regularly. And before I could ask him, but why don't you do it then? He said, but we are so busy. Our lives are so busy that there are so many demands on our time that we just cannot do it. We don't have time for that. And then an interesting sentence that he concluded his motivation with. He said, but I know the church will always be there. And whenever I decide to, and we have time to come there, the church will be there. It's on the green. I know where it is. I drive past it every day. And at some stage we will show up there, and we really want to do it. And I didn't respond except to say I see. And then we carried on with small talk, like I had to learn to do, when I became a minister. It's an essential tool in the toolbox for my profession, to the extent that it can still be regarded as a profession. I was wondering about that in New Smyrna Beach, in my first church in the U.S. There was a lady, elderly person. I think she was agnostic, I'm not sure, but she came to a service for some reason. And she came to coffee hour afterwards, and we had an interesting conversation. At the end of the conversation, she said to me, you're such a nice and seemingly bright young man. Why don't you get a real job? So that that put me in my place and made me realize that one should be careful when you say your profession is to be a minister. But getting back to my conversation with that young man that said they know the church is always there. I've been pondering that, and it was been in the back of my mind since our conversation. And sometimes it comes up to the conscious level, and I think about it. That statement, the church will always be there. Because I think I've shared with some of you at least, without being pessimistic, that our current model of a theology of love, where you don't work with fear and you don't scare people into the church and into belief, the theology of love, combined with a market economy and a dominance of utilitarian thinking, that something must be useful, and also a dominance of individualism in society, and with the church normally having expensive property to maintain, of which a great part is, or a big part is, the staff expenses, having professionals to pay to maintain the life of the church. I've often said that plus a few other things that I don't want to bore you with, that in a combination is not a recipe for the sustainability of church as we know it. I've said that since the 1990s, and I think the trends that we observe and experience confirm that at least my analysis is partly right, partly correct. Thinking about that forces me to consider what the purpose is of church. What on earth are we doing here? As I've said in my welcome, people come here on a lovely fall day to worship. We sit in pews that are fortunately comfortable now with the new pew cushions. But I've said to the trustees and other people, this is a very expensive seat. A hideously expensive seat. We sit here when we have services, and now and then there is a concert of some sorts, or a vigil or something like that, but as an asset, this is expensive to maintain. It's a beautiful historic building, and I want to give credit to Building and Grounds, and credit to the people who contribute to make this happen. And I want to celebrate how the building is taken care of. I think the project to install a new heating system is almost complete now. Just an inspection over or something. Got to turn the gas on. Then we have efficient gas furnaces. New equipment at a price. But what do we do here? Why do we come here? Some people mentioned that this is like family. I think this is different from family. You're born into a family. You have to accept the people around you. You don't have much of a choice. That is what you do. You accept your family. You cannot deny bonds of blood. But to belong here and to come here is a choice. A choice that you constantly make. And 2 weeks ago in my welcoming words, I said something that I saw people turn up eyebrows to some extent, because I said, We come here to be with people that we enjoy to be with, and also to be with some that we don't like. And that to me is significant, that I think an important part of being church, of being this community, is to learn the art of living, where you are not forced to deal with the people that you don't like, or that differ from you, where we learn the art of living, and we learn how to deal with people that differ from us, and sometimes differ intensely, not on superficial stuff, but on foundational stuff in our lives and in society. It is a peculiar institution or an organization where people by choice come to be exposed to the learning curve and the difficulty of saying around shared ideals, we will put up with each other's peculiarities. We will put up and try to live with and learn to live with something and some things that sometimes upset us greatly. It is a peculiar institution that is based and it dedicates its time solely to live from the wellspring of compassion, to explore that on an individual basis and to be open to be transformed as an individual and as families by that wellspring of compassion. And then to be open to say, even when it is difficult, we enter into covenant, into agreement with one another to say, no matter how difficult it is, we will persist because of our agreement with one another, that we live from the wellspring of compassion, and that we want to express that compassion towards one another and in the world. It is a peculiar institution that enables and empowers people to do that. It is a peculiar gathering of people who openly acknowledges, even in a scientific age, and without shying away from the wonders of science, embracing that, and embracing new knowledge and exploration of new knowledge, that still acknowledges we marvel at the mystery of God. We marvel at the mystery of life. We ponder the meaning of life. We ponder the meaning of death. We share with one another in this enterprise, bound together through our covenant of love and compassion, to explore with one another and share in each other's joys, disappointments. And as we said in the unison or the responsive call to wisdom, we acknowledge that sometimes even in this covenant community, we are at our worst, but we still profess God is with us there. And sometimes we are gloriously at our best. And we can say, thank God, God is also there with us. That statement, the church will always be there, as I said, was somehow stuck with me. And sometimes I think we should tell the town, right, take your property, because we only own up to the drip line of this building for as long as there are religious services here. After a while, it will revert back to the town. But I don't think it is a given that the church and this kind of community, with everything that makes it difficult, will prevail and will be there. Because it's sometimes, or when you look at statistics, who are involved in church, generally speaking, and who support church, it is the middle class. And we know that the middle class is often finding it difficult to make ends meet, to cover everything that should be covered. We listened to two very, I think, powerful parables. Parables built around the one theme that Jesus had in his ministry and his teachings. But he called the kingdom of God, and in the book of Matthew, because it was written for a Jewish audience, the kingdom of heaven, because Jewish people, by practice, do not pronounce the word God or write it. So he calls it the kingdom of heaven is like this. And the kingdom of heaven, if we look at, and I think Jesus understood around it, was that condition that exists and come into being when God's love determines what happens and how it happens. And Jesus said this is how wise people act concerning that condition when God's love determines. And when they become part of that, they set priorities. Like this man who finds the treasure in the field, sells everything he has, focuses on that, acquires that treasure which is the kingdom of God. As covenant people, gathered here again this morning, busy with Stewardship Drive, busy with filling the positions on the boards through our nominating committee. And sometimes I think it's a massacre when you look at, for instance, the Board of Trustees. We have 4 trustees, including Liz as the president of the Board of Trustees, going off because she served 2 3-year terms, and the bylaws require that she goes off. Other boards look a bit better. But if I look at the demands on the Congregational Church of Topsfield, with the nature of what we try to be, as the place where we focus through the wellspring of compassion on learning to live together as God's people and to be conduits for that compassion. I often wonder, to what extent is this sustainable? Not because my salary is on the block. There are enough churches that one can go to earn a salary. But I'm committed to this covenant community. And I think we're doing something very important. Apart from the regular stuff that a covenant community of this nature is supposed to do, I think we are learning in a very difficult time the art of living when major differences exist, and together find the common ground of expressing God's love as God's people. And therefore, it is good to be starry-eyed and filled with hope and optimism. I like that. But I've said, I think it was about a month ago, it comes with a price. Or at a price, and that price is the setting of priorities realistically. Knowing this is what we are busy with, and also knowing this is what it requires. And therefore, I want to invite you to ponder with me that phrase, the church will always be there. This building will forever, in all its glory, be on the town green of Topsfield. Ponder with me the question whether we will still be involved in that. And I'm not trying to put you on a guilt trip. I think you know me well enough by now that that's not my nature. But I want to invite you to journey with me, thinking critically, but living hopefully. Living hopefully in truth, and above all, embracing one another in that common bond of compassion, committed to be the embodiment of God's love in the world. May we walk in that way into the future. Amen.